want me to call the police, Mr. Lowe?
Ask for Captain Dudley Smith. Tell him we're having a discussion about the death of an unemployed actor at a Sunset Strip motel.
These are the police.
Pull him off me, X-Lady!
I don't know how.
Now, I know you think you're the #1 hotshot, but here's the juice. If I take you out, 10 more lawyers will take your place tomorrow. They just won't come on the bus, that's all.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Mike. I am here to introduce NotEnoughTimeForMovies.com. It is a website that I am starting with regards to all the Oscar-nominated movies for Best Picture. My goal is to watch every single one of these movies and per year discuss the rankings from weakest to strongest. The reason I want to do this is every time you read articles or blogs or people's opinions, it's always, do they agree with the picture winner? If not, what should it have been? And we forget about all the other nominated films. So I want to go more in depth with these movies. And you'll see it on the website. You'll see the rankings. You'll see more in depth. And I also want to have conversation with everyday folk. I want to talk to my friends. I want to talk to strangers. Whoever wants to talk about a year, we're going to talk about it. You don't have to be an expert. You just have to have watched the movie, and hopefully you like movies. I consider myself a film enthusiast. I don't find myself a critic by any means. I consume movies on a regular basis, whether it's the 1,000 Blu-rays and 4K discs that I own, or when the movie theaters are open, I am going, at least once a week. So today, we are going to talk about 1997 movies with my good pal Jack. And before I get Jack on, I'm going to just go over the nominees real quick. And the nominees for 1997 for Best Picture were As Good as It Gets, The Full Monty, Good Will Hunting, LA Confidential, and Titanic. So let me bring in Jack, and we're going to also talk about each year. We're going to talk about some events that happened that were significant, some other movies that came out, and some other facts, just to kind of give you guys a recap of that year, because some of the years will be recent when you listen to these podcasts or recordings. Some are going to be way in the past where you're going to go, wow, that happened that year? I know, right? So, Jack, where are you at?
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. So, Jack of EdwardianJackal.com. Take a gander at the site when you get a chance. And, 97 was an interesting year, Mike. That was the year that IBM's Deep Blue, the chess playing computer, defeated chess champion Garry Kasparov for the first time. So not only was it a milestone that a computer won a human opponent, but a lot of folks feel that was kind of the cultural pivot on where artificial intelligence started to outpace human intelligence. So a little interesting tidbit there about 97, but I know you've got a lot of facts about 97 and what was going on that year. Yeah,
some interesting facts I have for 97. We have Steve Jobs comes back to Apple, which, for those who don't know, he was fired from his own company. Before that, Princess Diana died in that car crash, which was awful and made news worldwide. And that's going to actually tie into some of the nominated movies, which we'll go into in a little bit. And in the sports world, Mike Tyson bit off Evander Holyfield's ear, which, it's a bit crazy if you think about that. It was that long ago. The #1 song of the year was Elton John's version of Candle in the Wind. And Seinfeld was the #1 TV show. And also 97 with TV, South Park and Buffy the Vampire Slayer debuted.
Listen to this. Marcy comes over and she tells me that her ex-boyfriend was over late last night and yada, yada, yada. I'm really tired today.
Now, when we look at other movies that came out in 97, not just Oscar-nominated ones for Best Picture or even Oscar-nominated in general, some big ones that came out in 97, big as in notable or even box office-wise. You have Austin Powers, International Man of Mystery, the first one. Air Force One, Get Off My Plane. Batman and Robin, which killed the franchise and led us to the Christopher Nolan trilogy about 8 years later. Boogie Nights, Con Air with Nicolas Cage. The Game, Michael Douglas and David Fincher. I Know What You Did Last Summer, which a lot of people reference these days. Liar Liar, which continued Jim Carrey's dominance of the box office in the 90s. Men in Black, which brought us Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones and a great comedy comic book film. And Selena, where we really got to see Jennifer Lopez be Jennifer Lopez.
Yeah, 97 was interesting too. There was a bit of nostalgia in the cinema generally. So The Godfather re-released from Paramount Pictures. Obviously, a lot of folks went to go see that and see it on the big screen again. And then we also led into the special editions for the Star Wars trilogy. So we were lucky enough to get a little bit of Star Wars, a little bit of tweaking from George Lucas, but nonetheless, it's Star Wars in the movie theater. And I know, Mike, you've got a lot of stats on how well that performed that year.
Yeah, the first Star Wars, A New Hope, as they rebranded, I believe that was the year they rebranded, it grossed over $138 million at the box office domestic, which was the 8th highest grossing movie that year. Which you kind of think, movie 20 years old, grossing that much money is kind of silly. My parents, I remember, they thought my sister and I were crazy because we wanted to see these movies on the big screen. We weren't alive when any of them came out, so this was our chance to go see Star Wars on the big screen. My parents were just thinking, why wouldn't you just watch it on VHS? We have it on VHS, just pop it on in. So Star Wars, they all did pretty well, clearly A New Hope being the big one. Also 97, when it comes to box office, that was the first $1 billion grossing film, which was Titanic. It grossed $1.8 billion worldwide, and Titanic grossed $600 million domestic, which again was a record back then. So it's incredible when you saw the experience that Titanic was, and it did win Best Picture, which we'll discuss more about in a bit. But Titanic was such a powerhouse, and the drop-off per weekend was so minimal. That's how it kept grossing so much money, and that's why it blew every other movie out of the water. Maybe it's because everybody wanted to see Leo and Kate Winslet, but nevertheless, it was quite an experience, and it was quite an interesting year. 97, the reason I want to choose this year first, polling a few people, this was always one of the top 3 or 4 years that people wanted to hear about because the nominees are great. 97 was a great year for movies. So I figured this is a fun year to talk about. And also, I do enjoy Titanic. I think it's a good movie. And we're going to go into a bit more, but I don't think it should have won Best Picture from the nominated films. So, let's start talking about some of these nominees. Alrighty. So, again, to recap the nominees before we go over them, we have in alphabetical order, As Good as It Gets.
How do you write women so well?
I think of a man, and I take away reason and accountability.
The Full Monty.
We were just saying,
Witches on parade, bring your own microscope.
I don't see why the chuff not, Gerald.
Because you're fat and he's thin, and you're both ugly.
Good Will Hunting.
Sean, if the professor calls about that job, just tell him, sorry. I had to go see about a girl. Will.
Son of a bitch. He stole my line.
LA Confidential.
So cooperate, Miss Bracken. Why was Susan Leffert to the Night Owl?
I don't know. I never heard of the Night Owl till today.
How did she meet Patchett?
Pierce meets people.
And the winner, Titanic.
Pick up, you bastards!
Is there anyone there?
Yes, what do you see?
Iceberg, right ahead!
Thank you.
So the first movie that I'm going to bring up on this, which is still a good movie, but it's probably the weakest I'm going to pick for this, is The Full Monty.
I agree. The Full Monty has a lot of heart. It was interesting going back and watching the clips and kind of walking through it and reading some trivia. But, this movie, in the end, they didn't really know what to do with it. And what really saved it was the editing. Even the filmmakers themselves, the producers, they all acknowledged that it was saved in the cut. So, again, a great movie, had a lot of heart. It really kind of warmed my heart to watch it. But what did you think, Mike?
I agree with you. It's a success, which is always fun to watch. It's seen that little engine that could. The budget was around $3.5 million, and it grossed over $250 worldwide. It's a fun movie. I think the cast is great. The cast won Best Ensemble for the Screen Actors Guild Awards, which is like the Best Picture equivalent at the Oscars. It's a fun story. I don't know if that's why I wanted to start stripping at a young age, which I never did, but I could have made more money stripping than my previous job. So, and Magic Mike, what can I say? I'm not really Magic Mike, but I pretend to be. So I think the characters are great. I think the build up to the end where they put on the full Monty. That's a terrible accent. I'm sorry. But, it's one of those, you watch it. It's it's a fun movie. But I guess when you think of Best Picture, and my qualifications for movies in general, you need to entertain or move me. Yes, this movie was entertaining, but it was one of those, again, the movies that I listed of the nominees the big movies I listed that year, there's easily one or two of them I would have put in place of the full Monty, since they were only eligible for 5 Best Pictures at a time. Clearly, if we could have more Best Pictures, just add them on in. But it's cute, it's fun. I'm not sure how many people really remember it at this point, unless you bring it up.
Yeah, that's the thing too, and it spelled underdog, which sometimes the Oscars becomes, is that here's that small film, very independent, feel to it, ensemble cast with a lot of great actors that have moved on to bigger and better things. But in the end, it was that underdog film that it just quote unquote had to move its way up the Oscar, rungs to get where it's at. Not to say it's not a bad movie at all. It's a hilarious comedy. But to your point, is it that memorable? It felt like a slice in time, which sometimes Oscar does. Now we're looking a couple decades ahead. It was interesting, too, when I was looking up under some of the facts, Fox actually considered scrapping the theatrical and going straight to video just because they didn't have a very strong feeling for it. So, but it did, despite all those odds, it still made it all the way up to Oscar. To your point, it won BAFTA. So in the UK, it just was an incredible movie and I think a cultural zeitgeist for them.
Yeah, and it won the Oscar, I believe, for Best Score, or Best Score for a Comedy, which they don't have anymore. They used to have scores for comedy and drama. Now it's just Best Score. And the music was great in that movie. I will give it to them. I can hear it right now in my head. And it does make me smile. It's fun. But again, it's one of those, it fell into a year where there's so much competition against it. If this was any other year, I could see it being a stronger contender. Maybe still not being Best Picture, but a stronger contender. But 97 was one of those years where every movie pretty much I think was good. It's just how good was good. To go to the next nominee, of the nominees, eventually we'll tackle the Best Picture and discuss that. But the other nominee that I would consider next, I would pick Good Will Hunting.
I agree. Yeah, Good Will Hunting had, again, a lot of heart. It was coming from the right place. A very emotional movie for anybody that's seen it. We all know it's one of those scenes you have to have the box of Kleenex nearby. It's a vehicle for Robin Williams, which in context now has a lot different meaning than it did then. So it's very poignant today. If Robin were still around, I don't know how we would feel about it. Being a literary person, I enjoy it and I appreciate Good Will Hunting for what it is. But again, if you really read the backstory, this is one of those movies that almost didn't get made. Definitely could have made a lot of different turns, but there are a lot of different people behind the scenes making it happen. So still a great movie, solid movie. I see why it's in the nominee list. What do you think, Mike?
I first saw it. I liked it. As I got older, I liked it more. When I was a kid, when I saw this, so I was, I was just probably 10 or 11 when this came out. So obviously it didn't resonate with me as well as some of the other movies. I love Robin Williams, and when he won for supporting actor, his first and only Oscar win, I didn't want him to win Best Supporting Actor that year because I loved Greg Kinnear and As Good as It Gets, which you'll find out shortly. But as I've gotten older, to your point, and you mentioned as time's gone on, and with Robin Williams passing, and just seeing him do this role, the references, Family Guy's made fun of the scenes, the "It's not your fault."
Stewie. Yeah? It's not your fault. What? It's not your fault. Don't do this to me, man. Not you, man. It's not your fault. Screw you. Cut it out, man. It's not your fault. Why is it so hard?
It's not your fault. It's not your fault. That whole scene. And some of the quotes and some of the lines of this movie are just so good. How do you like them apples is the obvious one. when Robin Williams at the end is, son of a bitch, he stole my line. It's one of those, it's great. The cast is fantastic. Matt Damon's great. Ben Affleck's great. I believe Casey Affleck's in it as a young Casey Affleck.
I was about to say, he ad-libbed a lot of his lines in the movie, which again goes to show that this was one of those movies that was kind of at a breakneck kind of production. And Casey Affleck too. It's funny because I was thinking about him throughout the week. He is one of those kind of unsung actors. He really does his roles well. There's always a bit of levity to what he does, and he was pretty funny in the movie as well.
He's great, and also Minnie Driver is great in this movie as well. I don't want to leave her out. She did not win. She did get a bunch of nominations, but she did lose that year to Kim Basinger for LA Confidential, which again, we'll discuss that because that's one of the nominated films. But I did like this movie. It's not a movie that, it doesn't have low watchability. It's one you can watch, maybe once a year just to have, a good, it's emotional but heartwarming. It's got a little bit of that roller coaster, but it's one of those you can feel pretty good after watching it, I guess is how I would describe it.
No, and I think you're hitting it on the head too, Mike. The other thing is that with a movie like this, it's one of those you definitely need to see. Where the full Monty, if you missed it, I don't know if you'd be, bad off or anything like that. But,
I agree.
This is a vehicle that started Matt Damon and Ben Affleck's careers in a lot of ways. So even from a history of cinema standpoint, if you haven't seen this movie, you should definitely see it even from that context.
Yeah, it's their first Oscars that they won for screenplay. They were quite young winning it, but I do think they were deserving of winning it. I won't say that, especially with the Oscars, if I feel like they won, but somebody else was just as close, usually I agree with the winner. I'll call it as tie goes to the runner, like baseball, if you will. So with this, I was happy they won, and Matt Damon and Ben Affleck have proven they're not just one-hit wonders. They've done several great films. They've been Oscar nominated, and Ben Affleck won Best Picture for Argo in 2012, which that's another view, another podcast or whatever for down the road. So I think for Good Will Hunting, we're on the same page as there. We may be on the same page for all of this, but that's fine. So the next one that I'm going to throw in there, I'm going to talk about As Good as It Gets.
Yeah, so this is, if this were my list and my website, I would put As Good as It Gets as actually the winner of the Academy Award for that year. Going back and watching Helen Hunt and Jack Nicholson's performance, Greg Kinnear's performance, it is the pitch perfect comedy movie by James L. Brooks, who put a lot of heart and soul into a movie that's well constructed, well crafted. It's a very serious, I think it's a very adult movie. So I know this would be a hard one, I'd say, for anybody younger than probably 35 to watch and maybe get the same feeling from it. But it's funny as time moves on and I get older, I look back and you look at basically folks in a midlife crisis almost. Now, although he tried to skirt that a bit, that's effectively what it is for Jack Nicholson's character in the movie, right? He's fighting a bit of age. He's up against the clock. So is Helen Hunt. She even says it in the movie at one point that, the clock is ticking and she still hasn't, found love yet. But going back, Helen Hunt, what an appreciation for that actress in that particular movie where I feel like in a lot of other movies, she never got a role that good. And Jack Nicholson downplaying a bit of his role. You see the tension that he has in the movie. So for me, I think that should have won it. It's hard for comedies to win Oscars, as you know, Mike. It's one of those things that doesn't happen very often. So I feel very strongly that it would have been that. But what's your take on the movie?
So I saw it in theaters and I loved it. I don't know if it's because I love Jack Nicholson, the music, which is by Hans Zimmer, that just upbeat and it's kind of, happy.
Don't be like me. Don't you be like me. You stay just the way you are, because you are a perfect man, and I'm going to take you home and get you something to eat.
Though there's some really dark moments in this movie for a comedy. There's a couple of dark moments, which if you haven't seen it, I'd rather not spoil it for anybody. I would just recommend checking it out. With movies in general, if you can go in kind of blind, it's kind of fun that way. But Jack Nicholson, his role in acting was fantastic. This is his third Oscar he won, but the first time he won an Oscar, but the movie didn't win Best Picture. Jack Nicholson also won Best Actor for 75 Cuckoo's Nest, and he won Supporting Actor in 83 for James L. Brooks's Terms of Endearment, which I thought was a phenomenal movie. Helen Hunt, pretty much swept, it felt, most of the awards, and she was well deserving. Greg Kinnear was so convincing of his character that I'm 100% with you on the acting was superb. As you watch it, it's a fun movie that has a lot of seriousness to it, but they make light of it so you can kind of just understand it more. Because the thing is, in today's day and age, I guess for myself, I always like to see the funny side of things. Not trying to be the Joker when I say that, as I think about it out loud, but I like seeing these characters interact. Cuba Gooding Jr., the year before he was in Jerry Maguire, won the Oscar. He's in this movie for a brief role, but I watched it again on Netflix, and this would be my number 2 of the year. And I would put this better than Titanic, so I can agree with you on that perspective. But my number 1 choice is a little different. Which I'll just cut right into, is LA Confidential. All right. So we're going to talk about my number 1 pick, which is LA Confidential. And I will love to hear your perspective, but I will start with this one. This movie is near and dear to my heart. I always tell people, if I have to pick one movie, usually I pick 5 movies to talk about my top 5 of all time. If I have to pick one, it is LA Confidential. So all my friends who know me would probably have guessed this, but with LA Confidential, it is, 1997. The cast in this movie is near perfection. I don't think there's anybody who's miscast or anybody who I could replace with anyone else. Curtis Hanson directed it. Side note, Curtis Hanson also directed 8 Mile, which my parents, I had to have them take me for my birthday because I wasn't 17, or my friends to go see 8 Mile. And since they loved LA Confidential so much, they were willing to go see 8 Mile. And that's another one we'll talk about down the road because 8 Mile is an Oscar-winning movie. But for LA Confidential, this is a film noir, takes place in LA. The movie comes out in 1997, and it feels like it's the 50s. It looks great. It feels great. When I would watch this, almost every time I would find something new. I would relate to some of the main characters. One movie I would feel like I am Russell Crowe's character, or Guy Pearce's, or Kevin Spacey's character. I would relate to almost every single one in a different aspect. So I always just felt myself, being really wowed by this movie. I thought the characters, again, I don't want to repeat myself too much, but I'll let you take over, John, so we can kind of go back and forth real quick. But what are your thoughts on LA Confidential?
Yeah, no disagreements for me. LA Confidential is definitely a callback movie to a lot of just, United States cinema in general. It's a pastiche of a lot of, like you said, the film noir genre itself, as well as callbacks to Chinatown. Although I know the director wanted to make it more distinctive, so he shot it in a much different style to make it not look exactly like that. So LA Confidential has a lot of gleam to it. It's very crisp, amazing shots, but at the same time, you feel like you already said, it feels like you are in the 50s. You feel like you are living in LA at that time. So an amazing piece of cinematic history. I'm actually surprised as we talk through it and we review things that there hasn't been more made in this genre like this. So I think there's been a couple of movies, and they're not coming to mind, but I think one was, I'm going to kill it, but I'm just surprised no one has made them like this because it seems like to me it's almost its own genre in a lot of ways. It's almost like a modern film noir in color with a lot of modern techniques around it. To your point too, the acting is amazing. Just looking at it now, though, I wonder why the poster is so bad.
Yeah, it's funny. I have a poster in my room with all the critics, and it's black and white. It looks a little bit better. I think you can see the star power from Kim Basinger in the front to looks like I see one with Kevin Spacey and then Guy Pearce and Russell Crowe, who this is one of his earlier roles and really proves himself as an actor. Just a disclosure, I know in the past there have been actors or actresses or directors who have done not good things, and some of them may be in the movies we're talking about, and including this one right here, but I'm just going strictly as a performance situation. I don't want to go into anything outside of the movie itself because the personal world and the real world is much different than the cinematic universe that we discuss movies in. Just to be completely clear with everybody that I don't condone any of those actions. Just I can comment on how great performances or movies are and separate the two. Hopefully, if you guys can't, that's okay, but this is just my personal feeling.
Yeah, definitely. You know, it's funny because time has a way of changing our perceptions of things. And so when you look at the past, and to your point too, Weinstein had a lot of hands in a lot of some of the best movies of all time, unfortunately. So his fingerprints and his name is in front of them. But that always goes back to that argument. Can you separate art from, you know, the people that create it? Sometimes it's always very difficult, even if it's other forms of art, like either it could be sculpture or painting. There's always problems in some of those as well. So it is always hard to reconcile that. But we have to look at this, right? To your point, Mike, let's look at this as art, as standalone movies, despite how they, who made them. Because again, you can't talk about the history of cinema without talking about Chinatown, right? And there's some problems there with the director who made that movie. And then you fast forward to this one as well. So totally understand.
Oh, yeah. And this one, to me, it's still great. I still watch it and I still love it. So the thing I want to do, which you'll see in the website if you guys read the pages, I try to pull a favorite scene. I try to pull a favorite quote. And I also am trying to do was there a Simpsons reference or a South Park or Family Guy or something? Just so that way, if you watch those movies or shows, you can go, oh, yeah. That's where it comes from, so you can kind of get in on the jokes. So for these recordings, I'll keep it just to my favorite choice for my favorite scene in the movie and favorite quote. My favorite scene is going to be the shootout at the end, and it's the end, so I don't want to give away too much, but it's a really intense ending. And my favorite quote of the movie is from Russell Crowe. I was about to say that like Elmer Fudd, so apologies, everybody. But my favorite quote is from Russell Crowe. It is when he is beating up the DA agent, or the district attorney, I should say, with Guy Pearce, and he starts throwing him in the bathroom and beating him up. And he goes, "Now I know you think you're a number one hot shot. Well, here's the juice. If I take you out, 10 more lawyers will take your place by this time tomorrow. They just won't come on the bus, that's all." And he just keeps beating him up, and he holds him out the window. And if I remember correctly, and I would love to find the clip sometime, Billy Crystal, when he hosted the Oscars, which he did for this year, he was the district attorney, and Russell Crowe holds him out the window, and he's like, okay, I'll host the Oscars again, okay. So I think that's just a great scene in general.
Yeah, it's amazing when you talk about the end. That was one of those movies I was watching where it was starting to come together, right? So you have all of these intersecting plot points all diverging together, and talking about it now, you get those chills and you get a little bit of the clenched hands. You're like, oh, you see it coming together. And it's just an amazing scene because it's not just the fight scene, but it is the convergence of a lot of points and plot points. And then what happens at the very end, without ruining anything, it does change the kind of the movie and how you think it was going to project. So not only are you kind of living with the movie as it goes along, but then you just have this ending scene that's just incredible, blows your mind. And not many movies can pull that off. So yeah, it's that is definitely one of the best scenes in all of cinema.
It's so much fun. And I could talk about it for hours, but I just heavily recommend, if you have not seen it, rent it, buy it on Blu-ray, do whatever you got to do, and watch it. So I picked LA Confidential as my movie, and you picked As Good as It Gets. I would, if I had to pick between As Good as It Gets or Titanic, I still would agree with you on As Good as It Gets. With Titanic, I would rank it number 4 of my 1 through 5 of all the movies. From 1997. I think Titanic is a huge technical achievement. What it did at the box office, it revitalized movie theater going experiences. $1.8 billion is something that doesn't happen very often. I know $1 billion movies now is like every other month I feel there's a $1 billion movie, but this was such a movie for the moment. The thing about Titanic, as we go into it, I feel Titanic, the last hour is incredible. It's emotional. The special effects and watching the ship go down, I even bought the 3D Blu-ray when it came out because I had a 3D TV and I just wanted to I'm gonna watch this in 3D, and it's still impressive. Don't get me wrong, it's impressive, but I guess the first couple hours of the movie not that it doesn't hold up well enough, but it's one of those, it doesn't do it for me like, again, As Good as It Gets or LA Confidential, and I would put Good Will Hunting in front of it as well.
Interesting. Yeah, going back and reviewing and the, time and how it works, you look at Titanic and, it's still amazing to me. I'll give it some props first in that technically it's an amazing movie.
Yeah.
There's things that, if it wasn't for Titanic, we wouldn't have today, just seamless scenes between transitions, how, like to your point about how the ship sinks, how that all comes together. You could watch it today and you don't see anything out of sorts. So, hats off to Cameron for pulling that off in a way that, again, seamless, and it's just part of the story, right? He didn't make the technology, the thing. He just made it. That's part of the story. This is what happened. So from that standpoint, and he was very passionate about Titanic, which you can see come across in the movie. And he put a lot of his own self into it, right? Budget wise and his career, hanging on that. And then you've also got really good acting from Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio, who are very young. I mean, very young at the time.
Super young and incredible. I mean, that's, Leo, household name, Kate Winslet, household name. And she was also great in Sense and Sensibility, which was just before. But people, I feel like this is the movie where you go, oh yeah, Leonardo DiCaprio, Kate Winslet. Like this is the one that launches them.
Exactly. And it was interesting reading some of the behind the scenes. Kate actually did quite a bit to rally for that role. There are a lot of females up for it, as we could imagine. But she put a lot of, she's called it a flood of tears behind it to really make sure that she got the part because she was young. But they saw, Cameron saw that and gave her that. And you could see it come across in the film. So great acting. Nothing to besmirch there. Great story. I think it was tight. I don't think anything was wasted. But to your point, I think when I go back and I look at some of the quotes, they're almost paint by numbers. Almost like Crayola versus you look at LA Confidential and its dialogue, and then you put it against Titanic's, and you can't even compare the two. And maybe you can't, right? Titanic's maybe not that kind of story where LA Confidential's that, that pot boiler, heavy-handed, gritty kind of dialogue that you have to have in order for it to be realistic. So nothing against Titanic at all, but to your point, I don't know how high I would rate it. I would put it, I'd still leave it in the nomination category.
I agree. I would too.
Yep. So it's still there. It's still hitting on all the right points. But yeah, what a hard one. I just see, like, to your point, As Good as It Gets for me, still up top. LA Confidential right behind it. But yeah, anything else on Titanic as far as how well it's played out, to today? Do you watch it today, Mike?
I watched it before this conversation, but it's not one I watch on a regular basis. It's 3 hours, and it's a little daunting at times. I mean, that last hour is well worth the wait, but the rest of the movie doesn't flow as quickly. Like, I would rather watch LA Confidential 2 times back to back for the way how quickly that movie flows. And that movie's 2 hours and 18 minutes, if I do my math correctly. So it's a little over 2 hours. It moves quickly. Titanic, I think you also need to be in the mood because with Titanic, it gets emotional, especially the ending, I think, there's a period in my 20s or even as a teenager where, you don't really feel as much sorrow as you would the people are, the Titanic sinks, people die, it sucks. But as you get older and you see, what life really is like, and not that I'm that old by any means, ladies and gentlemen, but, when you experience more life things and then you watch it and then you kind of put the context and put everything together, it does hit you a bit hard. So I watch it when I either need to discuss it, if you will, but it's not, I guess, one of the first ones I would, put in the player or on the streaming platforms if it's available on streaming. But again, I agree with you. I definitely think it should have been nominated. I think the 11 Oscars that it won, I don't know if it deserves every single one. If I break every one down, maybe I can go, oh yeah, this should have been this or this should have been this. But it did win a lot of Oscars essentially because it was everything was big about it. The length, the impact, the box office. It was just, this was the event of 1997 when it comes to going to the movies. Woo! My gosh. Wow. A lot of movies, a lot of good ones. 97, again, a lot to talk about. Again, with As Good as It Gets, Good Will Hunting, The Full Monty, LA Confidential, and Titanic winning. I know I did it out of order of alphabetical, but I apologize. Hopefully you're all okay with that. The other thing I wanted to get your thoughts on, John, do you think there are any movies, if you had the opportunity from 97, that you would have loved to see and get a nomination in addition to these?
Yeah, so reviewing the 97, year and seeing things like Contact crop up, and again, Contact over time, I don't think really basically survives as well as I thought it would, but it did have a lot of food for thought for me as a movie, what we consider hardcore science fiction. There isn't a lot of hard sci-fi out there. A lot of it's fluff, especially recently in the 2000s. So Contact was really one of those movies where it really made you think a bit about it, a few different topics. So I would just throw that one out there as food for thought. I don't think it would make a nomination list, but I did appreciate it. And another movie that came up was the Graduate re-release. Graduate's one of my favorite movies, so to see it on the list of 97 re-releases, and then I did go see it again, of course, because just seeing it in the theater is always a good time. What about you, Mike?
I would love to pick, let's see. The one, as I look at the list of what I listed earlier, I would pick Boogie Nights. Yep. Boogie Nights is my favorite Paul Thomas Anderson film. I think it holds up. Again, it takes place in the 70s and the 80s, about the adult film industry. It put Mark Wahlberg on the map. Burt Reynolds is great, Julianne Moore, Don Cheadle, John C. Reilly, William H. Macy, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Heather Graham. All of it's great. I mean, honestly, that to me, if you're going to pick a cast, I think is the best cast, maybe behind LA Confidential. I've watched that movie when it came out on DVD, which gladly my parents didn't really mind because, as a young, not even teenager, I guess, watching that movie, it may be much, but honestly, I watched it again as an adult to really understand what was going on, and it just looks great. It feels great. The acting is superb. I was going to say superb, which doesn't make sense, but hopefully you can understand how great this movie is. And yeah, the music is also superb. Oh man. Great soundtrack, just all around. I would also put it above Titanic if I could, if it was nominated. And it did get nominated for a few Oscars. So if you guys have a chance, check it out. It is quite good for those Oscars.
Highly quotable movie. You'll hear folks bring up a quote or two here and there. It's a great point too, Mike. From an ensemble standpoint, what a great ensemble of actors. A lot of them in their prime. To me, being a Burt Reynolds fan growing up in the 70s, just Burt's great in this movie. It was good to see him back and have a lot of, fire in his veins and his performance. And great call.
Yeah, he got nominated for Best Supporting Actor. So did Julianne Moore for Supporting Actress. And it was original screenplay for Paul Thomas Anderson, who in 97 was lost to Matt Damon and Ben Affleck for Good Will Hunting. So again, a lot of good competition that year. Again, if you put Boogie Nights in 96, I think it could have been the best picture that year. 98, more debatable. It's one of those, again, it's kind of interesting to see where these movies fall in what year, and, whoops, lost to that one.
As I say, it definitely moves me into just repitching, and we were talking during our break about As Good as It Gets, and I like what you're saying. Had it been another year, I just encourage folks just to go back and watch that movie, no matter what your age is, and just really understand the performances that are being given between Jack Nicholson and Helen Hunt and what won them the Oscars. Again, just a repitch of that. Hopefully folks will go check it out.
I support that 100%. It is some of the best acting you'll see. It is Jack Nicholson at his finest and Helen Hunt doing a superb job as well. Maybe next time in my next podcast or interview or whatever you want to call this, I will find other words than superb to use. Sorry, everybody. My bad. But I hope you all enjoyed that. Again, check out all these movies. I'd love to hear your feedback somehow, some way. We'll find out a comment section to see how you rank them. as long as everything's respectful, I want to hear your thoughts as well. I don't want to hear just, the critics. I don't want to hear them. I like Jack's opinions because he's an everyday guy. And it's great to hear people's perspectives because that's who are consuming these movies more so than anybody else. And we're consuming these movies because we want to. We don't get paid for this. We just do it because we love it. Again, I am Mike from NotEnoughTimeForMovies.com.
And I'm Jack from EdwardianJackal.com.
And stay tuned for the next one. I will do my best to do as many of these as soon as I can. The website is going to be a work in progress for a bit. So when you guys look at the years right now, I'm doing my best to just get you a picture from the movie, the distributor, and the name of the movie and who wrote and directed with a fun picture. And then my goal is to eventually rank them, do a deeper description per movie, and I'm going to do my best to share that with everybody. So if you look through the website, again, we have 92 years to cover. So it's going to take a lot of time. But if you guys are going to keep reading, I'm going to keep doing it regardless. Thank you all for stopping by. This was fun for me, and I hope Jack had a great time. I really want to thank Jack.
That was awesome.
Thank you, Jack. I mean, this was
great.
We kind of just did this. We did this on a whim. We talked about it. We just did it. So hopefully you all enjoy. And stay safe, everybody. Take care.